At RevSearch, we help private equity-backed companies accelerate revenue growth by delivering top RevOps talent. And today I have Matt Gallagher here. He is a portfolio CRO at HG Capital to share a little bit from the P perspective on the growth at NContracts after placing a RevOps role within their team. So Matt, to start off, can you share a little bit about your role as a portfolio CRO and how that typically helps you to engage with companies like in contracts?
Yeah, thank you. So at HG Capital, we have what's sometimes called an operations team or a value creation team. Within that, we have a growth team focused on sales, marketing, customer success. And as a portfolio CRO, I'm a specialist in helping the sales function of our 58 companies.
From a P perspective, why do you view RevOps as such a critical function for the growth of the portfolio companies that you work with?
Yeah, the most important thing is diagnosis. When you're looking at the growth of a company, and let's say you're behind on the ARR maybe for your investment case, it's so critical to be able to diagnose where the issue is. If you've got your issue could be retention, it could be a failure to expand your current customers, it could be we're not getting enough new logo, and even if you have that, let's say you're behind on your new logo. You need to understand, is that a failure to find pipeline? Is the pipeline not converting? Or do we have deals that are pushing out? The only way that you can diagnose the issue properly is with the right kind of metrics and people that actually know how to read the data that they have. And you need to have confidence that people are tracking and keeping the data clean. All of those things that I just talked about fall under the remit of revenue operations. And there's a wide variety in terms of the skills and quality of the folks there. So that's why I go to the RevSearch as often as I do, because I know that we're going to get good candidates and I know that they're vetted properly.
Just to give a little background context to In Contracts and your work with them, what were you seeing at In Contracts in the go-to-market function that really prompted this new addition to their team? And what were you and the CRO at In Contracts hoping this hire would really solve or make possible?
Yeah, great question. So NContracts was when we purchased, we combined two companies that roughly were 2/3 and 1/3 of the size of the combined company. So one, you're going to have new people working with each other that they haven't seen before. Two, the RevOps leader did not have a revenue ops background, very capable lady, but learning a new position. And then three, you had a CRO who was good at interpreting the metrics that we talked about before, but it was taking a lot of his time to do that. And one thing that we wanted that CRO to be much more strategic and starting to think 2, 3, 4 years down the road. What's the transformation going to look like in the future? If he was spending all his time reading and interpreting the metrics, that's just a big time sink for him. It's not the best and highest use of time. So the biggest issue we needed somebody in-house who could report into the current revenue ops leader, but had the pattern recognition and talent to interpret the data for the CRO to help inform all those decisions that we said before, to allow that CRO to raise their level and expand their time horizon.
And since this RevOps manager has come on board, what changes have you seen in the business? Has that been successful?
Yeah, I'll just before that, I'll just say, when Brian, the CRO, came to me and gave a picture of this hire, I went to my network first and just said, "Hey, do we know anybody like an up and coming RevOps person who's not a full head of revenue ops but is good at reading this data?" And I had two different people came back to me and said, "If I had somebody like that, I wouldn't let you have it." So it's a hard role to find somebody who's more junior but has that kind of talent. But when I explained it to David, he said, "Oh, I think we can find somebody like that," and then he did. And I circled back about a month ago with Brian and said, "Hey, how does that hiring turn out?" He said, "Oh, it's been fantastic. He's super talented, up to speed quickly." Now, it's changes in all kinds of business. This person's now doing more things than we initially hired for. That happens all the time. But absolutely solve for the issue that we had. So the impact there has been great, and it's allowed Brian to start thinking more about annual planning, reorgs, et cetera, to hit the 2 and 3 year bookings plans and growth plans.
How has their work impacted the way you and the board really relate with that management team at NContracts?
Yeah, I mean, again, the good news is that this is a strong functioning team, right? One statistic that I really like is how many of the sellers are at 80% to plan, and they are right at our benchmarks where we want to see. They've got a high number of their sellers, and you always use 80% because you tend to over quota a bit for some buffer, but they've got a high number of sellers that are functioning, which shows good management, good leadership at the top, good product market fit, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that's good. The impact that we see is, one, the board decks not only have a great level of detail in the metrics that they're sharing, so we can see what's happening today, but good call outs, good narrative that makes it easy for people who are not wonky go-to-market nerds like me to be able to read the tea leaves and see exactly what's happening. So they understand the storylines. Two, again, as I mentioned before, we can also see Brian's time horizon in terms of his planning and next steps and goals for the org for the next quarter. We can see that elevating, which was the main purpose of this hire. So that's been fantastic.
Very cool. All right, here's another RevOps question for you. Looking across your portfolio, do you see RevOps as a lever that you'll continue to pull more consistently, especially in light of just the success of what you've seen here in contracts?
Absolutely. The as I said, the most important thing when you have a growth issue is proper diagnosis. You've got to be able to find out where the problem is, because if you go in and you try to solve the wrong problem, one, it takes the time to actually put in the solution. Two, you then need time to see whether it worked. And then three, at that point, you realize, oh, wow, we didn't get the impact that we wanted. We didn't correct the problem. You've lost all that time. In private equity, you basically have 5 years to triple the value of the company, roughly, right? So have a problem, right? That probably means a couple quarters went by, probably at least 2 quarters where you had the issue. Then if you diagnose, that's going to take a quarter. If that diagnosis is done incorrectly, then there's another sales cycle. You might be a year and a half in to one problem, and at that point you still don't know what the root cause is. If you've misdiagnosed, you just know you didn't get it right. That's just a lot of time to lose. So when you miss for 2 quarters, the most important thing is diagnosing properly, and a revenue ops function is basically like the doctor's chart, right? Giving you the chart of all the readings so that you can diagnose properly. So that's why it's so important. And if you don't have that in when you have the issue, well, now you need to hire that person who then needs to clean up all the data, get everything in place. It's just adding more and more time to this finite number of quarters that you have. You have 20 quarters to get this right. You just can't lose that many, and then you just got so much time you need to make up. It makes things really difficult. So that's why it's so critical. It's just being able to figure out what is going on so that you can have the proper remedy.
It's a really cool perspective. Is there anything else you want to add about just the experience working with RevSearch or the success that you've seen in contracts with this RevOps manager coming on board?
I'll just say that that I always recommend using RevSearch, just because I know I can go to David with a very particular profile, like this is what we need, and I always get folks that fit that profile. And then I like the fact that he vets them for their ability to interpret data, because again, the diagnosis being so important. So that's why, look, I am a fan. I drink out of the branded Yeti for a reason. So that's the thing. I think it's not hard to just put a JD up for a RevOps role and, hey, I need all these kinds of tasks done. That's easy. Anybody can do that. Getting somebody who understands and can interpret the data is trickier, and you really need a careful eye in vetting those candidates to do that. That's what's important to me. That's why I go to him.